At a 5:30 meeting, but the ordinance is voted out of committee tonight, going to next week's meeting, except for Oliver's public hearing pieces that are slated for July 1.
Okay. So. You heard me? I don't like this pen though. I like it. Do I start it or they start it? I'm ready whenever you are, WITN.
Stand by. We're starting the broadcast.
Okay, I'm sorry. Could you go a little louder? I didn't hear you.
Yes. We're getting ready to start the broadcast.
Okay, you'll let me know when, right?
Yep. Correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we are now live. You may begin.
Thank you. Hello, I am Councilmember Maria Caprara, Councilmember at Large, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to another session of the Committee of Community Development and Urban Planning. At this time, I would like to do a roll call of my committee members. If you could all introduce yourself one by one, and then we will recognize the council members present.
Sinead Darby for the second district.
Thank you.
Trippy Congo, Council President.
Brigida
Yolanda
Fields,
McCoy.
Fifth District.
Yolanda McCoy, sixth district.
I need a roll call of just the committee members, and I will recognize the members. Let's first start with the committee members, please, and then we will recognize the other council members present. So we have Brigida Fields, which is a member of the committee, Council President, who's a member of the committee. Nathan Fields, are you with us?
Yeah, Nathan Field is here.
And the Vice Chair, and we have Mr. James Spadola.
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. And we had Councilmember Darby already introduce herself. At this time, I would like to recognize that we have Ms. Yolanda McCoy from the 6th District, Councilmember McCoy. We also have present Councilmember Xanthia Oliver. Is there any other council members that I may have missed that are on the meeting? Not hearing from anyone. Okay, we're going to proceed. So again, welcome for joining us this evening. We do have a presentation coming up after we present ordinances, and we're going to start with the first one, which is Ordinance 21-035, an ordinance to amend Chapter 34 of the City Code to revise the timing of appeals related to rental dwellings. I am the sponsor of this ordinance, and what this is an amendment to Chapter 34 of the Housing Code. As some of you may know, we voted to change the housing code to civil instead of criminal, which that means that we had to implement some other changes. What does that mean? That now, instead of waiting for these cases to go to court and to be heard in court, the city has a little bit more control on making sure that the property owners, the landlords, are taking care of the properties and being compliant with keeping them up to code. And understanding that there may not be an agreement between the city and the Commissioner of License and Inspection and the staff there and the inspectors with the landlords, property owners, when there is a citation given, they have an opportunity to not only appeal. It's going to be a one-step process. You don't have to have multiple appeals. So you can either appeal the citation if you're not in agreement that you should have gotten it. You can appeal if you did the work and the city still says that it was not adequate, and you can appeal that in one process. You don't have to do it multiple times. So that is what this ordinance is doing. This was a recommendation by the Landlords Association who spoke on this particular ordinance when we revised Chapter 34 of the Housing Code. So this is one of the amendments that we promised that we would make before the new ordinance goes into place. The amendment goes into place July 1st.
And I'm gonna call you back.
Okay, so at this point, I've given you a synopsis of what the code is, and if anyone would like to speak to this, Commissioner Starkey or anyone else, please feel free. Otherwise, I will entertain questions from council members, and then members of the public can also raise their hand to ask questions or make comments. Do we have anyone from License and Inspection? Commissioner Starkey, are you here with us this evening? I don't see his name.
Madam Chair, I'd like to be acknowledged.
Yes, Councilmember Oliver, I did acknowledge you earlier. I saw that you were signed on.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't see it. I don't see the commissioner, which is fine. Are there any questions from the members of council in reference to this ordinance? Oh, wow, that's really great. So now what we need to do is I will entertain a motion to vote this ordinance out of committee to be heard at the next council meeting, which is next Thursday at 6:30 p.m. May I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Madam Chair, we're going to ask for any public comments.
Oh, I'm so
on-
sorry. Yes. Hold on. I'm sorry. Let's hold that motion. Would anyone like to speak to this? I don't see any hands raised in the audience, but I will give it a moment here. All right, not seeing any public comments. Now we can go and make a motion to move it out of committee to the next city council meeting. I'll take that motion now. Are there any members of the committee that can move?
So moved.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, having the first and second, we are now going to move this to the council meeting next Thursday at 6:30 p.m. The next agenda item is Ordinance 21-030, an ordinance to amend Chapter 41 of the City Code to prohibit the outdoor advertising of alcohol and tobacco products. This is being sponsored by Councilmember Darby of the 2nd District. Councilmember Darby, you may speak on your ordinance.
Yes, thank you. I have a presentation, and we can go to that.
Okay, your presentation is up. As Councilmember Darby gets ready to start, I do want to apologize. Councilmember McCoy from the 6th District is a member of the committee. I am so sorry, Councilmember McCoy. I was stuck in traffic and a little frazzled trying to get here in time for the meeting. Okay, Councilmember Darby, we're ready whenever you are.
Chairwoman McCoy, sorry, Cabrera, this is Daniel Walker. It seems like Councilmember Darby may have been kicked off of the meeting.
Okay. All right. Well, until she gets back on again, Councilmember Darby is presenting with her PowerPoints, which we had it up, but we can go ahead and move to the next ordinance by Councilmember Oliver, and we will come back to Councilmember Darby's ordinance. That would be Ordinance 21-031, an ordinance to rezone the parcel of land located at 3001 Bower Streets from a zoning classification of M1, which is light manufacturing, to a zoning classification of R3, which is one family row houses. Councilmember Oliver, you can speak to this.
No, thank you, Madam Chair, but we have Ms. Nguyen here from the Planning Department that will be speaking to this. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Gwen, you can go ahead and proceed and speak on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a PowerPoint. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. This is Gwyneth Kaminsky with the Planning Department, and I'm presenting for Ordinance 2131. Before I begin, I want to note that this rezoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan amendment item also on the agenda are interrelated. And with your consideration, I will be discussing both items in this presentation. The city received a request from East Side Community Learning Center Foundation to rezone a single parcel of land located at 3001 Bower Street from M1 light manufacturing to R3 one family row houses. This property, shown in the photos, is situated within the block bounded by Todd's Lane, Bowers and Claymont Streets, and the city's northern boundary. Next slide, please. The proposed R3 zoning is consistent with the zoning of the remainder of the block, which is owned by the foundation and leased to the East Side Charter School for its current operations. The foundation is under contract to purchase the subject parcel from the current owner, John Jacobson, who supports the proposed rezoning. The rezoning will bring the entire block under the R3 classification, allowing for the expansion of the charter school on the site. Next slide, please. The current M1 zoning does not allow for the proposed school use, The site is currently occupied by a one-story commercial building being used for storage. The charter school occupies the remainder of the block and includes multiple buildings, athletic fields, and an accessory parking lot. There is a small street segment adjacent to 3001 Bower Street called Mendenhall Court, which the foundation has requested be removed from the official city map, and that item is also on tonight's agenda. Next slide, please. Across Todd's Lane to the south, the Wilmington Housing Authority's Riverside Public Housing Complex is undergoing a major revitalization initiative to include mixed income housing, support services, and amenities. This area is zoned R5A low density apartment houses. Next slide, please. To the west, the blocks between Claymont Street and Northeast Boulevard is zoned C2 secondary business centers. Businesses along this block back onto Claymont Street and are primarily commercial retail and service uses. Next slide, please. The blocks to the east of Bower Street are zoned M1 light manufacturing and include a mix of residential dwellings, indoor farming, social services, light manufacturing, commercial, and institutional uses. Next slide, please. The proposed rezoning will not create any non-conforming uses or otherwise negatively impact the property in question, as the current storage use on the site will cease operation once the sale of the property to the foundation is complete. The proposed school expansion is consistent with the proposed R3 zoning. Any new development on the site will be required to conform to the regulations governing the R3 district once approved. Next slide, please. 3001 Bower Street is located in the Prices Run Riverside 11th Street Bridge neighborhood. This rezoning action requires an amendment to the city's comprehensive development plan entitled Wilmington 2028, a comprehensive plan for our city and communities. This amendment will update the future land use map to change the land use classification for the rezoning site from mixed commercial light manufacturing to institutions. Next slide, please. The current mixed commercial light manufacturing land use permits uses consistent with those allowed under the current M1 zoning. It does not support institutional uses such as schools, and the existing land use classification does not support the uses allowed under the proposed R3 zoning. The proposed amendment to the map will change the land use category for the site to institutions to permit schools, libraries, and other uses that are allowed under the proposed R3 zoning. This map change is necessary because all zoning actions must be in accordance with the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission held a public hearing at their May 18th meeting and adopted Resolution 321, which recommends to Council that 3001 Bower Street be rezoned to R3. In addition, they adopted Resolution 221, which recommends the amendment to the comprehensive plan in support of the proposed zoning action. Legislation addressing the recommended rezoning action was introduced on June 3rd by the sponsor, Councilmember Oliver, 3rd District. Council public hearings for the rezoning action and the comprehensive plan amendment have been scheduled to be held on July 1st. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission supports the request of the Eastside Community Learning Center Foundation to rezone 3001 Bower Street from M1 to R3, which would bring the entire block under R3 zoning. The foundation is under contract to purchase this property and owns the remaining property within the block leased to the Eastside Charter School. This rezoning will allow for the expansion of the school and institutional use, which is compatible with the surrounding residential neighborhood. The Commission also supports the amendment to the Prices Run Riverside 11th Street Bridge future land use map, which will allow the institutional uses, which is consistent with the types of uses permitted under the R3 zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gwen from the Planning Department. At this point, I would entertain any questions from council on ordinances 30 through 32. Are there any council members that have questions or would like to comment?
I have a question.
Councilmember Darby, proceed.
Yes, I had issues with my internet, but I'm back. So I heard some of the presentation. So just from my understanding, just trying to get on board, we want to change it so that we can build family row homes there.
No, there are a variety of uses that are permitted under R3, some of which are institutional, like schools and hospitals, libraries. In this case, the remainder of the block is zoned R3, and it supports a school use, East Side Charter School. And the East Side Charter School would like to expand onto this property, and it cannot do so under the existing M1 zoning. So we would like to see the entire block rezoned to R3, which permits school uses as well as housing.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Darby. I don't see any other hands raised from members of council. Now I would like to encourage anyone from the public that would like to speak or make a comment on these ordinances. Okay, I see Mr. Charles McDowell has her hands raised. Mr. Charles McDowell, you may proceed. Make sure you're unmuted.
Thank you, Councilwoman Cabrera. I'm the CEO of the Eastside Community Learning Center Foundation, which has the contract to buy the property. I don't have any particular presentation to make. I just want to let you know that I'm here to answer any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Does anyone from City Council or the public have any questions of Mr. McDowell? Not hearing any.
Yes.
Go ahead, Councilmember McCoy.
Thank you. Mr. McDowell, my question basically, I didn't know whether or not I heard this because I'm trying to get back to my office as well. Whether or not, is there a timeline on once the zoning actually, is changed, is there a timeline on when we can expect actually some expansion from the school?
We're working on that with architects right now. It's probably 2 years to, do the renovation that's necessary.
May I follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you. So so my next question is, then if there's a 2-year timeline, like why are we doing this at this moment?
Well, we wouldn't want to acquire the property unless we knew it could be used for a school use.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember McCoy. I see Councilmember Oliver. You may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make it clear that I have met with Mr. McDowell, Principal Aaron Bass. So I think it's a good expansion of Eastside Charter because they're doing an outstanding job over there. So that's, as you have already said, that's what this pretty much is for. And they are getting some funding over there for resource centers for the kids in Eastside Charter. Their grades are amazing, and they follow them through school and give them scholarships. So anything dealing with education with our kids, minority kids in that community in there, and that whole area is really doing a great job. Thank you so much. And it was proven today because they were all out there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councilmember Oliver. I too would like to add that I have participated and attended some of the events, activities, and what I love about Eastside Charter School, that it's not just a school for the students and for their parents. You do so much outreach in the community. You welcome others to come out. I've participated, you did a family fun fair. You've done educational events. You've talked about issues that have to do with health and wellness and violence prevention. So you really are a true community partner. You are that community school that people come and gather, and not to mention the many meetings that you host there on premise. So you are serving our children in the city of Wilmington, and you are churning out scholars, and that is important as they move on to to their future. So we want to thank you for the work that you're doing there. And I'm certainly, we are supportive of this expansion so that you're able to provide even more services where they are needed. So thank you for being a true community partner here in Wilmington.
Well, thank you very much for your kind comments. That's very nice. We do intend to be a community resource.
Thank you so much, Mr. McDowell. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to move this ordinance into, this is going to be held and this is going to go to a meeting, and then it will be voted there for a zoning board meeting, and then it'll proceed to city council. So at this time, can we get a motion to move this to committee?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor? All in favor, respond aye.
Aye.
Second.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none. This will go. Okay, thank you. This will go to the zoning board meeting. I have to apologize. I believe that the Wi-Fi's get a little sketchy. Even my Wi-Fi is getting a little sketchy, and I happen to be here at City Hall. So if for some reason you don't hear anything, please just raise your hand, let us know. Okay, so moving along, let me go back to the first ordinance that I presented. If you've ever been on 95 and you see how people drive and they don't get on the exit, and it's crazy. That's what I went through before I came here. So I was completely thrown off when I started the meeting. And I do have to apologize. So we have to go back to ordinance 21-005. We did entertain the motion to send this to the council meeting next Thursday. However, we did not take a vote. So if at this point we do had a motion on the table to move this to the next council meeting, and I need to conduct a vote. So all in favor of moving ordinance 21-035, an ordinance to amend chapter 34 of the city code to revise the timing of appeals related to rental dwellings. All in favor of that, please respond with aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any opposed? We're in the ayes right now. We're in the nays. Anybody opposed? Okay, hearing none, then now it is officially moved into the council meeting. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and have Council Member Oliver continue. She has a resolution approving an amendment to the Comprehensive Development Plan entitled Wilmington 2028, a comprehensive plan for our city and communities. Councilmember Oliver, will you be speaking to this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, we have the expert, Gwen, that will be speaking to this also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gwen. You can proceed.
Thank you. I don't have a PowerPoint for this item. I did speak to it in my previous presentation, but I will just to summarize, as mentioned during the Bower Street rezoning presentation, that zoning actions must be consistent with the recommendations found in the comprehensive plan. And in this case, the future land use map for the Prices Run Riverside 11th Street Bridge neighborhood calls for mixed use light manufacturing land use on the Bower Street site, which permits the light manufacturing and other related uses, but it does not permit the types of institutional uses allowed under the R3 zoning being proposed. So before the rezoning action can be approved, the comprehensive plan must first be amended to change the recommended land use classification to institutions, which supports the uses that are consistent with the R3 zoning. And the proposed comprehensive plan amendment is scheduled for a public hearing on July 1st, along with the rezoning ordinance, at which time council will consider the resolution to amend the comp plan. Madam Chair, I would also point out that ordinance 21-32 was a separate item, not related to the rezoning, but it's about a street removal action. And there is a presentation for that as well, if you would like.
Yes, so we don't need to vote a resolution out of committee, but we, as just heard, it will be in the zoning meeting on July 1st. So at this point, let's go back to ordinance 21-032, an ordinance to approve the removal of Mendenhall Court from the official city map. This is sponsored by Councilmember Oliver and Ms. Gwen Kaminsky. You can proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. The East Side Community Learning Center Foundation is requesting the removal of Mendenhall Court from the official city map. Next slide, please. Originally known as Mendenhall Avenue, this street once extended from 24th Street to the city's northern boundary. City resolutions dating back to 1906 established the grades and street widths for Mendenhall Avenue, but a series of street removal actions over the years resulted in what appears to be the removal of all but the existing 102-foot by 50-foot segment. Next slide, please. And that remaining segment of street is shown on this slide. The street removal action requires the recommendation of the City Planning Commission and approval by City Council. Next slide. The current roadway intersects the north side of Todd's Lane, midway between Bowers and Claymont Streets. It is surrounded on the west by a school parking lot, which is accessed from both Todd's Lane and Claymont Street. To the north and west by the East Side Charter School campus, which I previously mentioned includes multiple buildings, athletic fields, and to the east by the one-story commercial building at 3001 Bower Street, which is currently being used for storage and is being acquired by the foundation. Next slide, please. Mendenhall Court is no longer a functioning street and does not provide for through traffic. There is little remaining pavement, although remnants of the street apron can be seen where it abuts Todd's Lane. As such, the removal of the street segment from the official city map would have no impact on traffic circulation within the surrounding street network. Next slide, please. As part of the evaluation of the proposed street removal, comments were sought from other city departments. The Public Works Water Division has advised that there is a section of 8-inch main and 2-inch service line at this location, which have been abandoned and do not require easements. The Sewer Division has advised that there are 3 sewer lines in the roadbed which will require easements. The Transportation Division has advised that this portion of Mendenhall Court is not an integral part of the street network, and therefore they take no exception to the street removal. And we did not receive any comments from the Fire Marshal's office. Next slide, please. The Planning Department has no objection to the street removal, given that there are no findings to suggest that this action would create a detriment to the general public or to public safety. The street does not contribute to the general traffic circulation or distribution patterns in the surrounding road network, and the necessary easements for the sewer utility can be provided. Next slide, please. Research conducted by Public Works indicates that Mendenhall Court was privately owned around 1919, but that there are no records to suggest current ownership, nor is there evidence that the city holds legal title to the street. Next slide, please. Section 42-11 of the City Code establishes the procedures for removing streets and for disposing of the land under the right-of-way. And in the case of Mendenhall Court, where ownership of the city street cannot be established, there can be a legislative finding of a lack of public interest in the right-of-way, and the city street may be removed from the official city map by council ordinance, but the determination of property rights in the right-of-way shall be a judicial determination in accordance with applicable state statutes. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at their May 18th meeting and approved Resolution 421, which recommends to City Council that Mendenhall Court be removed from the official city map, subject to department comments. The related legislation was introduced on June 3rd by the sponsor, Councilmember Oliver, and is scheduled for third and final action on July 1st, and there is no public hearing associated with the street removal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaminsky. At this point, I will entertain any questions from members of the City Council, the committee members, and any other council members. I don't see any hands raised. Any council members? No questions? Let's proceed to the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this? Not seeing any hands raised at this time. I will entertain a motion for ordinance 21-032, an ordinance to approve the removal of Mendenhall Court from the official city map. I will entertain a motion to have this sent over to the zoning committee.
So moved.
Chairwoman, that's going to be to the July 1st council meeting.
Okay,
For third
July
and final.
1st. Okay, July 1st council meeting, third and final reading. Okay. All right, all in favor, can we respond with an aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Not hearing any. This is going to be heard at the July 1st council meeting. Now we're going to go back up. Councilmember Darby, hopefully your connection is much better. Now we've been having some trouble here as well at City Hall. And we would like to hear from Councilmember Darby on ordinance 21-030, an ordinance to amend Chapter 41 of the City Code to prohibit the outdoor advertising of alcohol and tobacco products. And she does have a PowerPoint presentation to go along with this. You may proceed, Councilmember Darby.
Yes, thank you. So the proposed ordinance is to prohibit the outdoor advertising of alcohol and tobacco products. So some of the main things in this ordinance that happens, it actually limits the advertising of products to mandating that no more than 15% of window space be used to advertise these products. This provision is similar to the one that was passed in Baltimore, and it withstood legal scrutiny. It also, another main point about the ordinance, it requires billboard advertisements to be at least 500 feet from established schools, places of worship, or public playgrounds. And the third major piece about this legislation is that this ordinance provides an exception for the use of identifying the name of the establishment. So if it's a liquor store and it needs to say it's a liquor store, it's able to do that. It doesn't affect that in any way. But our children are walking by these stores that are advertising these things. And the problem is there's a connection between advertising and adolescent consumption, which has been noted in a large amount of studies relating to tobacco and alcohol products, which is creating a health risk for the whole community. So we find that advertising seduces young people into drinking alcohol beverages. Advertising of alcohol increases the probability that young people will start drinking and that those who already do would drink more. Adolescents who are more exposed to cigarette advertising tend to start smoking earlier than those who are unaware or only slightly aware of tobacco advertising. And there is a clear target for marketing. Like there's research for alcohol and tobacco companies on low income and Black and brown communities. We can go to the next slide. So why does this ordinance matter? I kind of hit into how alcohol and tobacco advertisements are targeted at low income and Black and brown communities. When you look at the city of Wilmington, you see high concentrations of this in neighborhoods that are Black and brown or low income, right? Where you have these high advertisements of tobacco and alcohol, where our children are being exposed to this on a daily basis. My daughter walks home from school, she's seeing at least from one store 5 tobacco advertisements. So this is about protecting the health and welfare of the children of Wilmington. It's about addressing inequities, social and economic disparities in low income and Black and brown neighborhoods. It's not a mistake. This is neighborhood design and planning, where there's research to show that Black and brown neighborhoods are targeted for tobacco and alcohol advertisements. And then there's the health disparities that exist from being more likely to smoke, more likely because you're exposed to this, right? So you have where African Americans have the highest mortality rate of any racial or ethnic group for all cancers combined and for most cancers. This is not because African American people aren't taking care of themselves. There are systemic issues and systemic things in our community that are exposing us to pollution, that is putting us at higher risk of partaking in activities such as using tobacco and using alcohol that are contributing to these large health disparities that exist. Young Black Americans are more likely to develop and die from chronic diseases that don't show up in white Americans until older age. And then you have things, imagine I am a 13-year-old Black girl who lives in Wilmington. Every day, as my daughter does, she has to walk and see these tobacco and alcohol advertisements. Her risk of smoking goes up, her risk of alcohol consumption goes up. And we're already plagued in a community where my daughter was at a bus stop and they were shooting, right? And she's already being gun violent. Then you have being attacked by these advertisements of that's contributing to the higher risk of our children being able to use tobacco and alcohol, right? And imagine her as a young Black girl growing up in Wilmington being exposed to all of these disparities and systemic issues. And these are one of the barriers or one of the things that our children are faced with, right? And another statistic or health disparity is that Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related issues than a white woman. Black babies are 3 times more likely to die. If I'm a young Black girl, 13, and I smoke at an early age, I start smoking at 14, by the time I get pregnant, what does compared to someone who wasn't exposed, who didn't smoke, what do my health outcomes look like, right? So we want to, as a community, use all the avenues we can to make sure that our community is healthy, that we're decreasing health disparities, that we're looking at addressing the inequities that exist in communities in regards to advertising, where in Black communities and brown communities, alcohol and tobacco advertisements are purposefully targeted, right, for young Black kids so that they can smoke later on in life. And what really needs to happen for this to become law is that we need to have this conversation in this committee about what it looks like to have these tobacco and alcohol advertisement. And then once we have this conversation, and if it comes out of the committee, it will go to the city council full body meeting for everyone to vote on. So I'm going to open it up for questions and comments from my council colleagues, and then questions and comments from the public about the ordinance and limiting the amount of advertisements of tobacco and alcohol advertisements in our communities.
Thank you, Councilmember Darby, for that presentation. You actually made some excellent points. Having worked as the consultant when Delaware got the tobacco monies and they had to use that to educate the community about, the dangers of tobacco. We had to make it culturally accessible to all communities, including the Latin community. So I was hired as a consultant to help with that. And I know that we have rules in place now for that. But you certainly have made me aware, and I really never noticed that. I actually would like to go out and do a little walk around the community to see where, you're saying the signage on the windows, it's using more than 50% to promote these products. I was going to ask you, because I know there are studies out there, were you able to research any specific numbers that show that if you do cut back on some of this advertising, or where there's more advertising, there's more usage? Do you have any specifics? I know that there are some studies out there. Just wondering if you had any of those numbers with you to share with us.
So I don't have them in front of me right now, but I can share and make sure that it's available for what happened in Baltimore and the impact of when they got eliminate, when they limited the tobacco and alcohol advertisements there. So I can definitely provide that for you.
Okay, great. So to understand, this isn't about eliminating the advertising of, let's say, the the alcohol products, but it's really putting just some stipulations that they not be within 500 feet of a school. Because, you know, obviously we have a lot of income that derives from the taxes, and I'm certainly not encouraging young people to drink, but we do have businesses in the city of Wilmington. That's their livelihood. They do, you know, provide alcoholic products. So it's not that we're trying to shut them down or limit to what they can do or advertise, but it's basically just putting a restriction as to not doing it in those school zones. I just want to be clear that that's what we're talking about, because I know at first some folks were really concerned about what this ordinance really means, which is why we have it here in committees for you to explain. So can you elaborate on that with the alcohol advertising?
Yes, so it can't be more than, let me go back, 15%. Advertisement.
15%, I believe, is for the tobacco, right? Because obviously, if it's a liquor store, they're going to have advertisement outdoors. Are you saying that for the alcohol, they also cannot use more of 15% of their window space to advertise their products or their sales? I just want to be clear on that.
No, yes, that is clear. So it will be for both. It limits the advertising of products through mandating that no more than 15% of window space be used to advertise these products. However, this ordinance provides an exception for the use of identifying the name of the establishment.
Okay.
And it requires billboard advertisements to be at least 500 feet from established schools, places of worship, or public playgrounds. So really, this is more about future users more than current users, because people who buy alcohol now or tobacco, they're gonna go buy it with the signs or without the advertisements, right? So this is more for me about future users. Like, how do we reduce children being exposed to this so that they're not at a higher risk of being able to use at a younger age or later in life, right? So it's more about, they're going to still make their sales. People are still going to go for the alcohol, the people who currently use. I don't think it's going to affect that, but it will affect children not having the probability, a higher probability of being able to consume alcohol or tobacco in the future.
Okay, great. At this point, I would entertain, I don't have any other questions. I might circle back with another one, but at this point, I would like our members of the committee to ask any questions that they have of Councilmember Darby. And I see that Councilmember McCoy has her hand up. So let's start with Councilmember McCoy. Please proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilman Darby, thank you for bringing this point to our attention. This is something that I had an ordinance I worked on last term as well. And what I think people really need to understand that this is all about the recruitment. Tobacco, big tobacco has never stopped recruiting our children when it comes to what the future smoker, the future of their industry relies on more and more people to continue smoking. And as we're realizing that this is, this is a detriment, whether or not they go from having actual cigarettes with live tobacco to having the vapes and all of that stuff. It's basically, in order for them to continue making money, they always have to have new smokers. And that's the bottom line. I do agree that when it comes to the urban communities, the convenience stores, all you see is the Newport, the Cools and everything. And I was so surprised because once I really took a better look at it from last term, doing the research, I did not realize just how much we advertise tobacco. Now, when it came to the spirit stores, liquor stores, whatever you want to call it, I understand that they want to make certain that because this is the nature of their business, they want people to know exactly what they sell. And I got it. And like you stated, anybody who's already smoking and who's already drinking knows exactly where to go to get it. But what we're doing is we definitely want to make certain that we try to deter any new users. So I just think that this is it's actually good. I probably would have separated me personally because I was more so about tobacco. But yeah, I still really want to make certain that we do not basically give big tobacco a bunch of our young children to get emphysema and things of that nature in the future, because they always have pipes and the cigarettes and cigars, flavor cigars and everything, all right within reach and always promoted. So I just think that, also one other thing is, I was told that there was supposed to be limitation on how tobacco was, how it was advertised. Within the past 2 months, I have had an advertisement for Vuse, V-U-S-E, which is, I think, is a vapor product on television. And I have gotten 2 mail coupons in the mail. I don't know whether or not they targeting census tracts or zip codes, but Juul, J-U-U-L, sent me for the smokers, like adult smokers inside, sent me 2 coupons to my house. And we don't have any smokers. So they are trying to find other ways to reach people, since we're up to their schemes on trying to get our kids. So I just want to make certain that people are aware.
Thank you, Councilmember McCoy. You made some excellent points there. I too, now that I think about it, have seen where some tobacco advertisement has come through, but that's because my daughter was a smoker. So I think maybe she may have signed up for something at that point. But I know that with the tobacco, there was, the huge lawsuit, and they're very limited to what they can do. But I'm sure that there's still some things that are permitted, but certainly something for us to review. Are there any other members of council that would like to speak to this before we open it up for the public?
Can I ask a question?
Councilmember Fields, yes, you may proceed.
Yes. So I just have a couple questions. Thank you, Councilwoman Darby, for. Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Can you? Yeah. So I have a couple questions.
Yes,
Thank you, Councilwoman Darby, for bringing this issue up. I had an interesting conversation a couple of days ago with Councilwoman McCoy, and she showed me some advertisements that were very direct in the mail. I thought that was very interesting. My question is, why would limiting window space to that amount, given that so much of the advertising is by mail and probably by phone, why or how would limiting window space to 15% have an effect?
Yes. So our children play a lot outside. I think more children will see an advertisement on a corner store or a liquor store that's next to a corner store than to see a mail-in. Literally in the 2nd District on Market Street, between both sides, there's 3 liquor stores, 2 corner stores, and like a 2-3 block radius. So literally walking down the street, one store has 5 tobacco advertisements on there, right? So our children are being more exposed to it on foot, like outside, than they are in the mail. So that's where most of the exposure is happening for children. So like probably mail-ins is more for adults, people who get mail, and those are probably, if they're already using, they know where to go to get the alcohol and the tobacco. So I'm really not getting into that issue on people who use already, but trying to just stop the future recruitment of our young people, specifically that are targeted in Black and brown and poor neighborhoods, to become future users for these big companies.
Thank you, Councilmember Darby.
And one thing I do want to add one more thing, that I couldn't full blown ban it at all. It had to be some percentage of it, because they still have like their First Amendment right, like freedom of speech and stuff. So they still have a right to that, but there's still some limits on things. People, you're still limits on your freedom of speech, right? So that's why it couldn't be banned fully. But if we can lessen it, we can hopefully contribute to the greater health of the community.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes, you may.
Councilwoman Darby, so the idea of, I agree with you. I think tobacco smoking I think it's terrible for health, and I'm all for limiting smoking, and taking steps to see that people starting off in life don't pick up the habit. But the principle of telling a store owner what you can and cannot do, I mean, if the law says that they can sell it, my question is, to what extent have you vetted this legally? Have you talked to the law department? Is this even legal to pass such an ordinance?
Yeah, so when you, so the law department drafted the legislation. So I've been in back and forth with the law department. And actually in the city of Baltimore, when they passed it, they were, the city, I'm assuming, was taken to court around this, right? And they won. And the reason why they won, because the greater health of the community overrides the business owner's right to advertise as much tobacco and alcohol and target Black and brown and low income communities. So the greater health of the community mattered more than their right to just advertise and target specific groups of people. So yes, it is legal. The law department reviewed it, and in other cities, it went through court, and the city won.
Thank you for your response. Councilman Fields, do you have any follow-ups?
Yes. I'm
Go ahead, you may proceed.
in spirit, I'm with this effort, but I have a lot of questions. I think this is a big step to take. It's quite a large step. I would be very interested in having further discussions on this, and if you would be interested in arranging maybe a tour, walking through and looking at some of these stores, I would happily show up, and I would be interested in investigating this further. But I'm concerned, and I have a lot of open questions. I think that this needs to be researched further, and I think that these store owners have to have more time to provide their input on this. And so for that reason, I'm not in support of this at this effort at this moment, but I'm definitely interested in talking more about it and taking any other steps potentially to limit teen smoking, because I do think it's a very big issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fields. At this point, we have Councilmember at large, James Spadola. You may proceed.
Thank you, Councilmember Cabrera. I have 3 questions, actually, if you wouldn't mind. I'd
Go ahead, one right after the other, that's fine.
Thank you. I have similar concerns that Councilmember Field mentioned, and I'm curious to hear, and Councilmember Darby, if I could, I'll just spout off all the questions, and if you can respond to whoever you may. Curious if you are interested in carving out between, making this 2 pieces of legislation, which I think would make it more palatable. I mean, a separate, 1 piece of legislation for alcohol, 1 for tobacco, and also the lawsuit. Do you have any idea how much the city of Baltimore had to pay to defend itself in that lawsuit? And 3, how would this be enforced? Would this be something that L&I folks would be, having to measure what 15% of a sign was, and would they be, what kind of a citation would be getting? But just some thoughts I have. Thank you.
Yeah, so the last question, yes, it would be L&I. And also, as council people, we should be vigilant in our community and being able to communicate with different departments to make sure things are in line in our district. I don't know how much they paid in the lawsuit. That information was not in the research that the law department did on this. And then the first question, what was the first question?
Separating into 2, maybe 2 separate ordinances, 1 for the alcohol and 1 for the tobacco.
Oh, yes, I will be open to separating it, yes.
Thank you, Councilmember Darby. Are there any other members of council that have questions? Because I am going to circle back with a couple points. No one else? Okay, I see someone from the public does have a question or a comment. Ms. Cheyenne Miller, you may proceed.
Hi, my name is Cheyenne Miller. I am a resident of the 7th District over on West Side. And I just want to say, you know, this is really good legislation that I don't think should be held up at all. And in all honesty, you know, I live on West Side. It doesn't take but a walk around the corner from the 8th District or from the 5th District to see, or from really any district, the 6th District. You can walk around and see where all of these advertisements are. I grew up on the West Side. I grew up in Wilmington, and in all of the broke parts of the city, this is where you see lots and lots of these advertisements. And it's not good for our kids. It's not good for our families. I just feel as if, you know, to hold this legislation up for anything like this, it just doesn't make sense. To not be supportive of this does not make sense. And to not, you know, to feel as though you have to have some type of a tour to be able to see this, it's just privilege at hand. And so I really hope that we can see this legislation move forward. It is essential for our kids. It's a no-brainer. It's not going to harm anyone. Current users will not necessarily be like, oh, I'm not gonna drink anymore because there's 15% less. Like, no, we're not having a situation where this is going to have an impact on sales. And frankly, anyone who is you know, concerned, you know, I would hope that you would be more concerned about our children and the children in this city. You know, we just need to have a better community in general. And I feel as if this legislation can get us towards aesthetically a better community at the bare minimum, and long-term on real health concerns, it can make us a healthier community if we have less of our children being exposed to these types of advertisements. And so I would urge for everyone on this committee to support wholeheartedly legislation that would help our kids, and wholeheartedly legislation that would make our neighborhoods look a little bit more welcoming and our neighborhoods to look a lot healthier in the future. So I appreciate the opportunity to share my public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. As always, we appreciate you participating in the process. Are there any other members of council that might have any comments or questions? Okay, not seeing any. I too would like to wrap it up with a couple things. One, I will say that I'm pretty much opposed to the number of liquor stores that we have throughout the city, especially in neighborhoods where we have the highest amount of disparity. I live in a neighborhood where I just go down the street, and just to get from my point to get over to 4th Street, I come across 2 liquor stores where there is always congregation. At this point, the new thing is the tailgate parties where they're just drinking out of the trunk directly across from the liquor store. And there's always shootings and things that happen. And I'm not saying it happens everywhere, but the majority of it does happen near a liquor store or a problematic corner store. I would like to tour the neighborhoods, and I'd like to see how this looks in affluent neighborhoods as well as the neighborhoods that are in disparity, because there is a point. You have more of these liquor stores in these neighborhoods that have disparity, and you have the advertising, and a lot of our children, they don't have options of where to go, so they are playing in those neighborhoods, and we have so many of them in neighborhoods that you're bound to have a home with children who's a neighbor to a liquor store. So, and I like to see also the proximity of the advertisement to the school parks and the current locations. And of course, if there's any data, Councilmember Darby, that you can share with us, the statistics are important. At the same time, I'm not a fan of rushing things through. It's not that I want to wait either, but the option of maybe separating this into 2 is one that I would consider, because I do believe that push comes to shove, our businesses that are in the city of Wilmington, good, bad, or ugly, as opposed as I am to these liquor stores, they still are businesses. They do pay taxes, and they should have an opportunity to also speak to this. They may be opposed, they may be in favor, and I don't know if there's any negotiations on the 15%. If maybe we meet them halfway. So if they have 75% of their window with advertising, can they drop it down to 25%? I know that you're looking at what they did in Baltimore and following that example. And I don't think it's a bad one. I think that, you know, as Ms. Miller said, we really should be thinking about our children and the future users. And is this really going to hurt their business by not advertising in a way that children would get to see it? You know, they're vices. Both of them are vices. So those are my comments. And Councilwoman Darby, you have the last word on this. We certainly can vote this out to the council meeting, put it on the floor, or we can further discuss it as you would like, present any amendments. That really is your choice. I think that you could probably garner more support with just a little bit more communication with all of the members of council. That's just my opinion. But again, I am not going to hold it in committee. I'm certainly going to vote it out of committee and determine how I would vote next Thursday. So at this point, you have the last word, Councilmember Darby.
Yes. Well, thank you. So I would be interested in separating the tobacco and alcohol. So I am open to that. I also want to add that if you grew up in Wilmington, you wouldn't need a walkthrough. You see it clearly in these neighborhoods that there is something targeted in certain neighborhoods, and it's not good for the neighborhood. I just want to add that. So you can walk through any neighborhood and see it. I also want to add that this is not about stopping sales of alcohol or sales of tobacco. It's about future recruitment of our children, which is targeting Black and brown children, and that this is something that we must address. So I'm open to I don't know if I can amend it to separate it out. I don't know how this works. I've only been here for about 7 months. So what do I do?
I understand, Councilmember Darby. Sometimes even those of us who have been here have to ask questions on this. So I would say that we would hold it this evening, not vote it out to the council meeting, which is next Thursday. I am willing to work with you on this, Councilman Fields. Let's really take a close look at this. Let's poll the rest of our council members as well. Make sure they have all the information, because I think this is an excellent piece of legislation. Let's tighten it up, because I want you to get those more than 7 votes. I believe that more than 7 people should vote for this. So that's my recommendation as chair. If we do vote it out of committee tonight, I will vote it out of committee tonight, but I just don't want it to go on the floor and know that some people still have some questions, and maybe they would be more supportive if it was 2 separate pieces. I don't want it not to pass on the floor next Thursday, and then we got to go back to square one. That is, you know, the limit of my knowledge, and thinking that that would be the best way to proceed, to hold it now in committee, revisit it, bring it back again, and we can vote this and get it out there. You know, we can have this in full force by September. You know, that's my recommendation, or however, whenever we have to implement it. We probably need to give them some time to implement it. But that's my recommendation. It really is up to you. You are the sponsor.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Then I'll hold it so that I can separate tobacco and alcohol. And then I'll work with it with you. And then Council Member Fields, he could do a drive-by through the neighborhood maybe tonight, and then we can talk about it. You could drive through any district where there's primarily Black and brown and low-income people, and you will see the advertisement. And then we can all reconvene and have this conversation.
I think that's great. Thank you so much, Councilmember Darby. You are wonderfully flexible. And I think we should just set up a time and invite a few other council members. And because you did go out there and you saw some of it, we would love to have you be our guide, because yes, you're right. I'm going to now pay more attention as I'm out there. I see the advertisement. I mean, it's not like it's not there, but you certainly bring attention to the fact that the schools, the playgrounds, the places of workshop. I mean, these liquor stores, the ones I'm talking about, they're directly across from the church. So yes, I think that that is an excellent idea. I thank you for your flexibility. So we are going to hold Ordinance 21-30 an ordinance to amend chapter 41 of the city code to prohibit the outdoor advertising of alcohol and tobacco products. So with that said, Councilman Darby, you also have another one, which is substitute to ordinance 21-008, amend chapter 5 of the city code to require detailed owner information on applicants for a business license to operate a residential property. If you would like to speak to that, or someone else, we can proceed.
Yeah, I'll be speaking to it. I have a presentation for that too.
Great.
I think the next slide. Yep. All right. So this proposed ordinance is to require more details about the owner on the application for a business license to operate a rental property. So what does it do, right? So owners of residential rental properties are required to obtain a business license. It's already law, something they have to do. However, it is not always clear who owns the properties when only an LLC is listed. This ordinance will require more detailed information, including the name, and they have to list all of their affiliated LLCs and entities that operate a rental property in that city. So if I'm LLC Shanae and I have another LLC, I don't know, Darby, I would have to list on my application that I'm affiliated with that LLC on that application. Why does it matter? This provides more transparency about who owns rental properties in Wilmington and could potentially help hold owners, operators of rental properties accountable in helping to improve the housing stock in Wilmington. So we know we have a lot of issues in housing in our city, and this is one of those things in trying to address who are the landlords and connecting to what they own. So what needs to happen for this to become law? We have a discussion about it here in this committee, and then it's voted out. And then at the next council meeting, we voted by a full body. City council during a full body meeting. But I'm going to open it up for any questions or comments from my colleagues, and then I guess public comment from there.
You still there, Councilmember Darby?
Yeah, I said I was going to open it up for questions or comments. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. At this point, we have Councilman Field. You have your hand up. Please proceed with any questions you have.
Sorry, that was actually up from the previous discussion.
Okay, I see you found your hand. Okay. Is there any other council members that have any questions or comments to this? Okay, at this point, I'm going to move it to the public, and we have two hands that are raised. We're going to start with Cheyenne Miller, and then Mr. Jeff, and then Brian O'Neill. You may proceed, Ms. Miller.
Cheyenne Miller from the Homes Campaign, 7th District, Wilmington. Definitely would love to see this legislation passed. We've been talking about it for a few months now. And this is legislation that we know would create transparency around who owns what properties in the city. We often hear from people across the city when we're canvassing that, you know, they're not sure who owns what properties. And even when they do go through the process of looking that information up of who owns what rental properties, they are blocked from seeing who the true owners are because they can't go past what they see as basically an LLC. And so we're hoping that, you know, what this will do is help provide more transparency for residents across the city to know who owns these properties. And also, hopefully it will provide some ability for us to hold landlords accountable who are not easily found, that are hiding behind LLCs, but need to start making some real changes to the way that they operate their rental properties. Be it so that they're, you know, sticking to the code and making sure their properties are clean, and or just making sure that they're treating their tenants with respect and legally. So very supportive of this piece of legislation. This is something that was on the Homes Campaign's policy agenda, and just wanted to give space to say, you know, this is something we hope to see this council pass. Thank you very much for hearing our public comment.
Thank you so much. And then we can we can proceed to Jeff. Who has, oh no, Jeff put his hands down. Brian O'Neill. Mr. O'Neill, you can proceed. I have hands. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. You may proceed, Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, I understand the intent of this, but I have to warn council that, you're potentially going down a slippery slope. Delaware is built on franchise taxes, or, major revenue sources, franchise taxes from LLCs and other corporations. Piercing that corporate veil, going into who the true owners are, not that I, oppose it, in part, you might be running down a slippery slope. You have a tool in your tool belt right now, which is when you fill out the LON for a property, you have to say who the responsible party is, whether it is a property manager or one of the owners is. When you start cutting through and going after what could potentially be silent partners in LLCs, you're basically trying to pierce what the purpose of an LLC or a corporate veil is. I have a problem with, and I think, a lot of people in Delaware will. Not that there's, the purpose is a nefarious act being conducted, but it is the purpose of anonymity for people who invest in real estate in a passive approach and let, the active members or the managing members conduct the day-to-day business. I think if you limit the disclosure to who the active member is, or the responsible property manager is, that is where you're going to get your, who's being held accountable. I just warn you of that. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill, for your comments. I do not see any other hands raised from the public. Are there any council members that have any questions or will speak to this or want to speak to this?
Madam Chair, sorry, this is WITN. We did see Christian Willard's hand go up.
Okay, well, let me ask her if she wants to speak. It's not up on my end here. Ms. Willauer, would you like to speak to this?
Yes.
Okay, you may proceed.
Hi, my name is Christian Willauer. I'm a volunteer with the Homes Campaign. HOME stands for Housing, Opportunity, Mobility, Equity, and Stability. Homes Campaign is a group of residents working together to promote better housing for all city residents. More information, you can find more information about housing issues and how to get involved on the Homes Campaign page on Facebook. This ordinance solves the problem that sometimes landlords use LLCs to avoid being held accountable to providing quality housing to renters. For example, sometimes a landlord will set up an LLC for every property they own. This makes it difficult for L&I and neighbors to identify a pattern of behavior, such as letting their properties run down by a particular landlord. The great thing about this legislation is that it doesn't pierce the corporate veil, but it enables L&I to connect the dots. By requiring landlords list other LLCs they're affiliated with when they apply for a rental license for a particular property, the ordinance gives L&I and residents the tools to connect one property to another property that's all owned by people who are the same people. This makes it easier to focus on which landlords have a pattern of neglecting their properties, no matter which ownership structure they might use for the properties they own. Quality rental housing is good for families and neighborhoods. The Homes Campaign thanks Councilmember Darby for sponsoring this legislation, and I want to encourage council members to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willauer, for speaking this evening. And speaking of L&I, we have the Commissioner of L&I, Jeff Starkey, with us today. And he is going to speak a little bit to this in terms of what he needs in order to do his job in enforcement and to make sure that he's able to contact and reach these businesses. Commissioner Starkey, you may proceed. Make sure you're unmuted. Your mic is off. Okay, until we get back to the commissioner, I see that Councilman Field has his hand up. You may proceed, Councilman Field.
Yes, I have a question. I want to learn more information about this, and I have been frustrated myself with this and trying to figure out who owns properties. So I agree, it's an issue. But the question I have is, do you have a rough number or estimate, Councilwoman Darby, of the total number of properties that you've experienced or in your district where there's an issue of unknown owner? That's basically my question. Just a rough, what scope and scale are we talking about?
So I don't have an exact number, but at the the Civic Association meetings I'm going to, a lot of them talk about not being able to make contact after, or being able to hold landlords accountable, or being able to connect the dots that there is a landlord who owns multiple properties and has multiple infractions of not, upholding their property. So that happens here. I don't have I wasn't keeping track. I don't have an exact number or a percentage specifically for a second district, but I know it's the issue here in the second district.
Thank you, Council Member Darby. Let me see if Commissioner Starkey came back to us. Commissioner Starkey, are you with us? I still see that your mic is muted. He might be having connection issues. I did want to ask a few questions. This came up before in conversation, and I think we held the piece, the ordinance before and brought it back. So some of the concerns that I recall, there's no one here from law or the finance department to speak to this. So one of the things that the city did, and when I was on council the first time around, we worked on this because we realized that there wasn't enough information on the applications and that we did have a hard time being able to catch up to landlords. But those changes were made, and the application asks for more information now than it did previously. And if it needs to be revamped, certainly I'm all for that. But what I'm hearing from the actual people that have to implement this from the finance department when they testified to this before is that the information that they have is adequate. It gives them everything that they need to be able to contact the individual owners of these properties or the LLC. So they're not having a hard time reaching them. And Commissioner Starkey, with the changes that were made on the applications, felt that they have all the information that they need in order to move forward, contact the owners of the properties, take care of the necessary business, and now with the amendment to Housing Code 34, hold them accountable a lot quicker from changing the ordinance from criminal to civil, so that they feel that if it's not broke, we don't have to fix it. The other problem was that now the whole system, there's got to be some infrastructure changes to the compilation of data, and that was just something that they felt that if it's something that wasn't needed, that the effort and the investment in making it was not going to take place. Again, we can pass this ordinance, we can bring it out to the floor and see what happens. It could be vetoed if the administration feels that this is overreach. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but those were part of the discussions that were had in committee prior to. So I just wanted to bring those points up because they were discussed and those people are not here to speak to them. Is there anyone else that might have a comment to make? Otherwise, Councilmember Darby will have the last word. I see a hand did go up. Councilmember McCoy.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The reason my statement is basically towards the process. So the last time we did actually speak about this process, knowing that it would take, I guess, more money in order to make certain that this is something that the data will be stored, correctly. But if I remember correctly, we're still doing paper applications. And so whatever information is actually placed onto this paper application, that in turn was actually placed onto, like, I guess whatever these systems are. It's knowing that, I don't think that it will be harmful to change the actual paper application. That means that even if we don't have that data quickly at hand, you can still, if we have paper applications and we're still doing it that old way, we still have a piece of paper at hand stating what these remaining questions were, that it will make it a little easier to get to whom that landlord or owner is, I guess that other responsible party. I just wanted to make certain that I was remembering this correctly. And if Mr. Starkey was able to get back on the line, please let me know whether or not I remembered it correctly.
Thank you, Councilmember McCoy, and Commissioner Starkey is able to get on the line, and that he can give us more details from that discussion. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Starkey. Are you with us now? It still shows that you're muted. WITN, is that something on our end? Are we muting him? Because he's the only one that has the mic. Okay, he's unmuted. Go ahead, Commissioner Starkey. We still cannot hear you. Commissioner Starkey, are you able to get on WITN? Is there anything going on our end?
One thing I can do, I can try to bring him over to see if that will solve the problem. 1 minute, please.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, council member.
Yes, I just wanted to state that there was a comment from Marshall Bassnight.
Okay. Let me go to the chat. Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Darby, while we're waiting to get Commissioner Starkey on board, because we do want to get feedback from him, could you speak to the fiscal impact of implementing this particular ordinance?
Yeah, so I did not get a specific number or fiscal impact, but I know when Commissioner Starkey and the mayor's office came to speak at the last committee hearing when we talked about this legislation, they did talk about being able to change the system. There would be a fiscal impact. And I don't remember how much they said, but that was the only time that I received a fiscal impact is in regard to adding that question onto the application. They said would cost too much to do. So I don't have a fiscal impact from them.
Okay, let's see if we have Commissioner Starkey. I mean, my recommendation is we're doing these paper applications. That whole system needs to be revamped so that folks can do this electronically. We're going to get the commissioner now. He might have to just do it the old-fashioned way.
Your call has been forwarded.
Oops, I was gonna have him just do it by phone. Yeah, because I mean, he does have some of the answers to what we need at this meeting. Okay, now, Commissioner Starkey, we're going to do this the old-fashioned way by phone. Maybe you could turn your thing off so that you don't hear the feedback. Yeah, close out your Zoom. Yeah, we're not doing all that. That's the space noises. Okay, all right. We can hear. Yes, we can hear you. Okay, Commissioner Starkey's going to speak now.
Well, I mean, first of all, the actual business license coming out of finance. They actually issued a business license. But I mean, as we talked about earlier or previously, it will help us in terms of, being able to contact people. Now that we went to a civil penalty process we'll be able to expedite our stuff a little faster. But again, they fill out an LON, as Mr. O'Neill mentioned before. That's the information that we need in order to process any civil penalties. Well, previously a criminal summons, now a civil penalty. So we'll still be able to do the same process, add additional information. Won't give us any additional information and won't provide us with any additional help.
Okay. Councilmember McCoy, I believe, had a question. Were you able to hear what she said?
No, I was not.
Okay. Councilmember McCoy, do you mind repeating what you had mentioned? You wanted to make sure that you had heard that clearly.
Okay, yes. So Commissioner Starkey, the question that the statement I made was because from what I understand, we are still using paper applications. I do realize that there was going to be, I guess, as you say, a fiscal impact by changing systems in order to pick up that another piece of data. But as I stated, we're still doing things in paper. To me, it wouldn't change anything if you actually just added that question to a paper application. And if you cannot, if you're still unable to find things throughout the process that you normally do, you can still go retrieve that piece of paper and say, okay, it's still Joe Buttons or whatever. Like, oh, he's still the guy.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Right now, everything is done paper. It's done through finance and not through L&I. So all that paper or that form would have to be changed in order to accommodate this information. But because it's not electronic, you're not going to be able to scan it based on the information unless it's electronic.
So, can I follow, Madam Chair?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you. So, so then we will probably I need to be having this conversation with Brett Taylor, because I would like to know, with all of these paper applications that have now been basically translated or input into our system, where do they go once that information is put into our system? That's what I was trying to get to. I'm like, if we still are coding on the paper.
That's a better question for Brett. But L&I we are updating our systems to a Salesforce system, which gives us a better resources in terms of having all the information in front of us. So come July 1st, we'll be on a Salesforce new software, and that'll help us out tremendously. We'll have all the information in front of us. Inspectors will be able to see rental license, building permits, everything in one form, as opposed to what we were doing currently, where we're going through 3 or 4 different systems.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no more questions.
Thank you. Are there any other members of council that might have a question that may not have been answered that Commissioner Starkey could elaborate on? Okay, not hearing any at this time. I know we don't have the clear fiscal impact on this. However, we can go ahead and move this to either to the city council meeting, but at this point, I want Councilmember Darby to have the final word. Thank you.
Yes. So yes, thank you, Chair. So I have a question for Commissioner Starkey. Is there a current process to connecting an entity or individual to multiple LLCs? So let's say I'm LLC Shanae and my roof is falling apart. I still have tenants living there, but I also have other LLCs that are in bad condition. How are we connecting to know that that one entity, that one person is connected to all of these homes that aren't livable or has issues or conditions? How are we making those connections now?
Well, the only way we can really make the connection is if those LLCs have the same addresses. That's how we basically, are able to tie them together. But if the LLC has different addresses in different locations, it's kind of difficult to do that.
Yeah, so that's what this legislation would be addressing, the difficulty in being able to connect different people, I don't know how to word it, different LLCs to one entity or one person or one organization, right? Like, how do we do that to make sure that if a multi-offender, we can label them as a multi-offender and be able to handle that accordingly? So that was my question. But other than that, I don't have any other questions, comments, or thoughts. We can just move it out of committee now.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you, Commissioner, for making yourself available. Sorry,
I apologize for the connection issues. So.
Listen, it happens. We're still, trying to work with this all new technology, but thank God we have it and we've been able to stay connected to some extent. Thank you so much. I'm going to hang up now. All right. Okay, so at this time, I will entertain a motion to submit substitute 2 to ordinance 21-008 to amend chapter 5 of the city code to require detailed owner information on applications for a business license to operate a residential rental property. Can I have a motion?
So move.
Second, please. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed signify by saying nay. Okay, it has been first. Thank you. It has been first and second, and it will be on the council meeting next Thursday for a full vote. And at this point, I do want to thank so much our invited guest who's here to speak on the Collaborate Northeast project. And we are getting their presentation ready, and I would like to welcome them to this meeting and would love to hear about everything that's going on over there. So at this time, we will proceed with our presentation and our invited guests this evening.
Thank you very much. I'm Bobby Britton. I am
Bobby Britton.
Yes, I am working with the community in the Northeast to pull this emerging organization together. This is coming from the Blueprint community effort, which everyone is familiar with. If you are familiar with Eastside Rising or Westside Grows, they started as Blueprint communities. The Northeast residents and stakeholders asked for some help in working through that blueprint process. And, we are at the halfway mark in that, and now trying to establish the kind of organization they might want to see carry the information forward and the projects forward. So the basis for these blueprint initiatives is to coordinate and facilitate place-based redevelopment. The community is looking to have things that are sustainable, creative, and actually community-driven, and have chosen that these things should, in fact, provide some economic and environmental resiliency and lift in the community. And as I said, it's based on the Northeast, on the blueprint process. So we have 3 basic focus areas: the community itself, the economy of the community broadly, as well as for individuals. And when we say environment, we're talking about the built environment of the community, the infrastructure, the road network, the sidewalks, trails, stormwater issues, all of those broad issues that impact the health and overall look of the community. Next slide, please. Oh gosh, is somebody moving this slide presentation from? There we go. Okay, so the process, or the method that we're using, is not to create yet one more nonprofit that's trying to solve the problems for the community, but instead bringing resource partners to the community to work with the community, so that together projects that will collectively impact the economic and environmental resilience of the community can be put into a process to get them through to implementation. Collaborate Northeast is serving as the backbone facilitation partner, and we are using collective impact as the process to focus all the right eyes to the extent that we can determine who those partners need to be on the opportunities to revitalize the Northeast. There are extraordinary opportunities there. And as a blueprint community effort, that allowed us to, in fact, qualify to be a partner organization with Equitable Wilmington, which has actually contributed in the short time that it has been up and running to what is going on in the Northeast. Next slide. This is a view of the EPA Brownfields area-wide plan that was finished in 2019. This whole effort was community-driven even before we applied for the EPA grant. The community was asked, if this process is going to start, if we're going to look at these brownfields, if we're going to look at this wonderful asset in Wilmington, in this area of Wilmington that the Brandywine affords, what is it that the community would like to see? And all of that information has been threaded through all the work that has been done. And this plan is the basis for the current work that is going on. Next slide. There's 4 new projects that are coming online that are more immediate than some of the longer term work that we're doing. And those are a 2021 Brandywine Riverfront Northeast Concept Plan, spurring economic growth in the Northeast by defining neighborhood character and gateways, a University of Delaware, DelDOT Living Lab partnership to create a pop-up intersection project, and an EPA Emerging Mobility Technical Assistance Program. And this pie chart on the right-hand side of the slide simply shows you what the participants who came to that very last 2019 EPA public workshop indicated their priority was for choosing one project that had to move forward. And 33% of those participants chose the Riverfront, which surprised even me. Next slide, please. This illustrates the 2021 Brandywine Riverfront Northeast Concept Plan. What we are looking at now currently would be the area in red, and that is extending from the 16th Street Bridge up to the North Market Street Bridge. And for this project, we are looking at both sides of the Brandywine, and we would like the participation of the residents, county council members, everyone from both sides of the Brandywine to participate in determining what the community wants to see here, what the priorities are for this connection. Next slide. The 2016 project resulted in a visualization of the community's vision for the Brandywine, which was to have a more restored shoreline, to not bulkhead. They really were talking about more forward-thinking concepts, and to include the trail and pathway that is part of the waterfront zoning. And you see that in the very edge. What you don't see is there's some extensions from the pathway out to the water's edge, because the community, whether it was residents back in 2019 or whether it was teens last year when we were talking with teens about these design concepts, fishing kept coming up as something people wanted to do. So that's been accommodated. And when we get to the end of the Diamond State salvage site at Church Street, there's the opportunity to do the canoe and kayak launching that the community asked for. And they wanted a dock so that they could launch smaller fishing boats and hopefully have a river taxi stop there at some point in time. Now, when we get to Church Street, the restoration of the river's edge can continue, but the pathway has to go across the front of the properties because we start interfacing with privately held property. Next slide. So the 2021 project goals are very similar to the 2016. That's to provide the access and amenities articulated by the community, coordinate the work with the community through a resident steering committee. And again, I would invite people from the other side of the Brandywine to participate. Consider the current EPA assessment grant that the city was awarded, which followed the EPA planning grant. And that is now looking at coordinating the site specifications for the Diamond State Salvage site with the site specifications for the 12th Street connector, and trying to make sure this community vision is incorporated as well. So we're starting to get down into the weeds and actually defining what's going to be necessary to develop that particular site, as well as some others in this EPA plan area. And the project will also address any recommendations from the EPA area-wide plan that are appropriate. The partners are American Rivers, the Partnership for the Delaware Estuary, Pannoni is the environmental engineering firm, and Collaborate Northeast is managing the community engagement aspect. Next slide. Can we have the next? Oh, thank you. The second project that we have going on is this spurring economic growth in Northeast Wilmington by defining neighborhood character and gateway projects. And the partners here, the resource partners that are coming to the table to work with the community, are the University of Delaware Landscape Architecture Program with Arnett, Muldrow and Associates, a national consultant. They are the primary partners that will be developing the work product. And True Access Capital and Collaborate Northeast were the applicants and would actually manage the, again, community engagement and the actual movement of the funds for this grant. The funding has been provided by the Delaware Sea Grant Resilient Communities and Economies Program. Next slide. The University of Delaware and the consultant have worked in some smaller towns in Sussex County and found that this concept of branding, developing gateways has really helped to engage the community more fully in trying to move things forward. So we are hoping that with this, it's almost a pilot project for Wilmington, we can look at how that might work on a corridor like North Market Street, which is a great typical 2-lane commercial corridor. People with some improvements can easily move from one side of the street to the other. There's a lot of opportunity to lift that corridor. And we know we've done work on both ends, but it's really time that we look at the entire corridor and figure out how to make sure there's not sections that are just dampening the ability of either end to really be as successful as they could be. And the product that will come out is a marketing package, a whole variety of things that hopefully could help stimulate commercial activity. They could be used to brand the corridor itself, individual businesses, institutional partners, however people want to use it. It's really going to be a community, a community toolbox for the community to use as they see fit. Next slide. The third project is a University of Delaware DelDOT partnership called the Living Lab, and they will be doing a pop-up intersection project at the Jessup Pine intersection with the 16th Street Bridge. And this happens to be the end point of the Diamond State Salvage site. It's the end point of the 12th Street connector, but there was really nothing creative and community enhancing that came out of the current work. So we're looking for this project to perhaps expand the work that was done and actually allow the community to have something to measure it here with what they should have. I mean, they should have the highest and best intersection improvement that can be provided, especially you know, as this connects to a national trail project, we just don't want to see the community shortchanged in terms of how all this works out. The partners for this are, as I said, DelDOT and the University of Delaware. The Partnership for the Delaware Estuary is also bringing in some small green infrastructure projects. DENREC is participating. And if we can actually get out there with real live people again soon, the community stakeholders were willing to put on a weekend event to actually draw people to this pop-up intersection so they could experience the kinds of design concepts that people are looking to put into this intersection. Next slide. This is a slide that a University of Delaware student did. They have worked with in the Northeast for at least 3 years, if not longer, looking at a whole variety of sites across the Northeast and providing some of their assessment and creativity to design within the Northeast. And his concept was, with very little effort, all 3 of these sites could be connected into what would become a substantial community amenity, a bicycle pedestrian circuit, which would really allow everyone to pretty much access anything between the Northeast Boulevard and Market Street in a safer bicycle and pedestrian manner. Next slide. So the 3 sites are the EPA area-wide plan work extending out into Price's Run Park, the multimodal pathway along the Brandywine, which actually connects people ultimately north through the preserved parkland and south to the Riverfront and the Markel Trail, taking them to Newcastle and beyond. And we have multiple community plans that have been done for the Northeast, you know, time and time again, that actually have some elements that were recommended for Market Street and never implemented. So we want to pull those up and use those as a basis for taking a look at the bicycle pedestrian infrastructure along Market Street, as well as all those other elements that are identified. Next. The fourth project is an EPA full emerging mobility technical assistance program. DENREC and the City of Wilmington, with a letter of support from the City of Wilmington, applied for this technical assistance, and the Price's Run neighborhood in Wilmington was chosen to get this full emerging mobility technical assistance as a pilot project. This is a new focus for the EPA, as well as it would, of course, be a new focus for us. And I, you know, fully believe that the results of this will be applicable far beyond the Price's Run neighborhood in Wilmington. But the Price's Run neighborhood happens to be somewhat of a transportation hub. This is where you have the bridges crossing to the downtown, allowing the neighborhoods on both sides of the Brandywine to be more effectively connected to each other. It's where you have access to 495, I-95, the 2 Route 13 arterials. You know, so if we can figure out how to use emerging mobility concepts that are starting to change the face of transit in this particular neighborhood, we will be able to apply those things elsewhere, and we'll kind of flip the coin and actually look at what we need in this highly underserved area and move it out to areas where it's much easier to deploy. So this is going to be a very short and concise program with the EPA. And again, I would invite any council members that would want to participate in this to please email me. We will make sure you're on the steering committee and are aware of the 3 work sessions that will take place. A lot of this is going to be done through just 6 weeks of evaluating the needs, identifying those with the EPA consultant, making sure they have a picture of what the Prices Run neighborhood and the neighborhoods connecting to it look like, what the issues are with regard to getting people where they need to go, primarily getting them to hubs where they can then get on transit and get to entry-level jobs or any jobs, get to the grocery stores that surround the community, but in fact, people can't readily get to. And we know that if we can get people to jobs, that has the most significant impact on raising the economic standard of living for the people in environmental justice communities. So we will communicate with you what the dates are, and please feel free to jump in there. This is one of those things, the more oars in the water, the better. Next slide. And to bring the right eyes to the table, we have engaged Dart First State Chief Innovation Officer, a senior planner at WillMapco, who has done a lot of work and has information to bring to the table regarding transit, the routes, what the situation is for the Northeast, and particularly Prices Run. We have representation from the city of Wilmington, DENREC, and we are reaching out, of course, as always, to the community, residents, and stakeholder organizations. Next slide. We also are involved in some larger initiatives. One of the reasons, well, the first one is the University of Delaware funded a grant. They matched the grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to actually look at resiliency through regeneration for Northeast Wilmington. That's a very broad look at the movement of stormwater. We know it's an issue. We have combined sewer overflow issues. There's just a lot that needs to be addressed in the Northeast. And the University of Delaware partnered with Texas A&M, and they have come up with a rather large recommendation, which hasn't been distributed publicly yet, but will come up soon. We're looking to then see if there are smaller components of that can be pulled out, and we can move some of these things through to implementation. We also intentionally asked American Rivers to apply for the DENREC Community Environmental Award, because we're hoping that that combined work from 2016 and the current work can be pulled together and create a ready to implement project. And that is their goal, to look for ready to implement projects along the urban Brandywine and Christina that they can recommend and try to help move through to implementation. We have additional placemaking initiatives that are, broadly scattered around, and education is woven into all of these projects. The resource partners themselves want to educate the community. The university is using these opportunities to educate their students, to give them something that simulates real life client experience. And we actually are connecting team groups to this design work and allowing them to participate in commenting on what they'd like to see happen in their own community. Next slide. So I'd like to thank Council Member Darby for inviting me tonight to this meeting, and for you guys allowing me to present. The project areas that we've described affect the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th districts. We have had tremendous support from our council members and some at-large members over the years who have attended meetings. And your continued support is needed. If you feel you can assist in helping get all the right eyes on these opportunities, we would welcome that, and assist in evaluating some of the funding strategies that hopefully will come out from some of this work. Next slide. So again, thank you. My contact information is here. The website for Collaborate Northeast can be found at northeastwilmington.com. And the logos of those people that have pushed this forward to this point are there. All the planning, everything that we have produced is on our website. This is not proprietary work. This is work for the community itself and any stakeholder organizations in the community to make use of, city. Anyone who finds it would help with anything they're doing. Is welcome to use this stuff. Thank you very much.
I have to unmute myself. Thank you so much for this presentation. I mean, it was well put together, very thorough, and certainly educated us to everything that's going on over there. And I have to say, I didn't know that half of this was going over there. I know there's been a lot of conversations about developing that area, and there's so much potential there. So first and foremost, definitely please keep City Council abreast of everything that's going on. Please invite us to these hearings. I think it is important that as council members, we do participate, being that we do represent a lot of the constituents in that area. And like you said, it's just a way to connect our city. There's multiple districts that are connected by that Northeast corridor. There's so much potential there. Not to mention, there's also that Riverfront area there, which also, it just opens the door for developing housing and having something on the Northeast as we have in the Riverfront. So there is a lot of work to be done, obviously, and it does take money, and people need to invest in this infrastructure. So we're in a place where maybe this is something we can do at this time as we're looking at infrastructure dollars. Certainly there's plenty of neighborhoods that need help in our city. And this is one way of really connecting and bringing it together. So I want to thank you for the presentation. So many things that you brought to our attention. And you can count on my support to work with you, and certainly other members of council, I'm sure, will be happy to jump on board. At this point, I know that we've been on this meeting for a while. I'd like to take some quick questions or comments from our council members and anyone from the public. I see Council Member Darby's hand is raised. You may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you to you, Ms. Bobby. I'm in full support of it as I represent the 2nd District. And I just want to say we need a lot of love on this side and investment dollars. And I just want to thank you for taking this time to present to the rest of the council about some of the great work or potential work that can happen on Northeast on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and even parts of the 4th District here to uplift in this side of town. We really need it here in the 2nd District. We are primarily homeowner district, working families, but it has a potential to plummet really quick. Just in the district, we have the police officers shooting. We have high gun violence. We have North Market Street that needs development. And it's like, I don't remember my neighborhood looking like this when I was a child, and it's really starting to go down, and we really need investment. We really need people to have this conversation about Northeast, and I want to thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any other hands from our council members, and we do have Christian Willauer from the public that would like to make a comment or have a question. You may proceed, Ms. Willauer.
I'm sorry, my hand, I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Oh, okay. All righty then. Okay, not seeing any other hands raised, any other comments. At this point, I would like to thank everyone for participating. We did have a lot of business to take care of this evening. Didn't mean for this meeting to go so long, but it's always important to have the discussion and engagement. So I appreciate all the council members that were on this evening, our invited guests, and the members of the public that are watching us and that participated this evening. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second? Can we get a second? I guess the council members want to stay on for a little longer. We need a second. Thank you. All in
Second.
favor? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. This ends this meeting of the Community Development and Urban Planning. Thank you so much. The next council meeting is next Thursday at 6:30 p.m. You can tune in channel 22, YouTube, or right here through Zoom. Look forward to seeing you. Thank you.